Okay, this should be a relatively quick synth, since bass pads don't generally have too much tonal intricacy so as to avoid muddying up the low frequencies. So, combinator, name it Big Ol' Bass, so it seems like it's the kind of synth you could trust if you lived in the Wild West era. Then make a mixer, and a Thor instance. Initialize it, and open it. We're going to add a multi-oscillator and another analog oscillator. The multi-oscillator has to be in the middle because then it's symmetrical, since my OCD has worsened in the past few videos. I'll just add in some notes now. Alright, so there's the notes, soloed out, and let's start on oscillator 1, since we aren't George Lucas. We just want a nice sine wave, down a few octaves, just as the deep sub-bassy power to the sound. And bring up that sustain while we're here so it's more consistent. There we go. Next, we're going to add in the multi-oscillator on interval mode. If I solo it out, or rather don't send through oscillator 1, take a listen to how much difference there is between random 1 mode and interval mode. It really is a lot cleaner on interval mode, which you need for the deeper sounds, or it ends up being very muddy. In fact, if you want it a bit more clean, you can turn down this detune amount here. But not too much. But I kind of like it where it was. Lastly, for oscillator 3, make it a square wave with the pulse width on center. I'll show you that now. Because if it's not on center, it's not a square wave, it's a pulse wave. A square wave means the pulse width is equal, whereas it's a pulse wave if the pulse width of the blip is offset. You can see that on the little diagrams around the PW knob if you squint a bit. So, let's bring that back up to the middle, send everything through, and take a listen. Let's take down these 2 octaves as well, and then take a listen. Now that's a bass pad. See, the square wave is a really good tone for making really deep sounds a bit thicker, since it's nice and hollow sounding, avoiding the mess that comes with tones that are more thickly spread over the frequency spectrum like saw waves. However, we've got our saw wave multi-oscillator here to give this a bit of grit and thickness, so without it, and with it, and that way the square just helps to get that deep growl that'll make this bass have some presence in the track, even with the big lead pad being obnoxious and taking up all the space. So, we're just going to adjust the mixer a little bit so we've got a bit more of this grit in there. Sweet. Now in the filter, turn the ENV to 0, so the filter envelope doesn't affect the filter. And then we're going to add an EQ. Right-click, create M-class equalizer. We've built up a lot of presence in the low mids. If I turn on param 1 and show you, around 300 Hertz. If we bring that up with about 2.5 Q, you can hear how much there is there. Now if we bring it down, that just makes the pad really deep and nice, without those low mids taking over the tone. So make sure you've notched out that fully around the 300 Hertz mark, so we're left with this subtle growling tone. And to show you the difference, take a listen to it with the ARP and the lead pad. I'll bring them down actually, because they're ridiculously loud. With it, and without it. It obviously felt a lot louder with the mids in there, but without it, it sat a lot better in the mix, I think you'll agree. You might want to adjust the filter frequency in Thor as well to stop too much high-end creeping through. That said, I do like to have some high-end for just a bit of width. But remember, widening lows is not a good idea, so let's do some auxiliary trickery. turn the aux up to full. On the mixer here, we're going to right click and create a UN16 unison unit, which makes a bunch of versions of the sound, 16 in this case, detunes them, and then widens them. But we're going to right click and add an M-class stereo imager with the crossover frequency down to about 200-300 Hz, and make the low band mono and the high band fully wide. So if I unsolo the other two so we can just concentrate on this pad for a moment. And we try it before, and if we dial it in. You can hear how much that thickens up the tone without muddying the low end. Now you can try this with solo high band on as well if you think it muddies the lows too much. But I kinda like it. Adds a subtle extra growl down there. And there we have it, an arpeggiated synth more uplifting than Tony Robbins in a hot air balloon, and a bass pad that growls like a Doberman whose owner thought it would be clever to call it Skrillex. Join me tomorrow for day 5, where I'll be looking into adding some effects, a sweet filter sweep, and discussing the effects and stutters I'll be using on the vocals for this song. Doodle pip!